In a landscape marked by escalating tensions and economic uncertainty, the trade relationship between the United States and China remains a focal point of global concern. Recent developments indicate that both nations are navigating a complex web of tariffs and trade negotiations with significant implications for industries that rely on cross-border commerce. As of April 24, 2025, China has firmly stated that it is not engaged in any active trade talks with the U.S. regarding tariffs, a position that contradicts assertions made by President Donald Trump earlier this week. During a press briefing, Gui Jiaquan, spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, dismissed claims of ongoing negotiations as groundless, asserting that both nations are not currently involved in consultations over tariffs. This announcement follows Trump's comments that suggested progress was being made, including a promise to potentially reduce the hefty 145% tariffs imposed on Chinese imports. China's stance, however, underscores a broader reluctance to engage unless discussions are predicated on mutual respect and equality. The ramifications of this trade discord extend beyond diplomatic rhetoric, affecting major corporations like Boeing, which is now repositioning itself to resell jets due to the impact of tariffs on its trade with China. As reported by Reuters, Boeing's strategy reflects the challenges faced by American companies as they navigate a landscape increasingly defined by retaliatory tariffs. The aerospace giant's decision highlights the urgency for U.S. businesses to adapt to the new economic realities wrought by ongoing tensions. At the same time, the healthcare sector is grappling with the fallout from these trade dynamics. The U.S. medical gear industry, which has been severely impacted by a reliance on inexpensive Chinese imports, is now questioning the efficacy of tariffs as a means to revitalize domestic production. Many manufacturers who had hoped that tariffs would level the playing field are finding themselves in a precarious situation as the costs of American-made protective gear remain high compared to their Chinese counterparts. Lloyd Armbrust, CEO of Armbrust American, expressed concern that while tariffs could foster independence from Chinese products, they also disrupt responsible industrial policy. The medical gear sector's struggles were laid bare during the COVID-19 pandemic, which exposed the vulnerabilities in supply chains heavily reliant on foreign production. Despite bipartisan efforts to bolster domestic manufacturing, many companies that emerged during the pandemic have since faltered as demand waned and competition from cheaper imports resurfaced. Only a handful of the startups that sprang up in response to the pandemic remain operational, highlighting the precarious nature of relying on tariffs to stimulate domestic industry. As negotiations stall and tariffs remain in place, the outlook for U.S.-China trade relations appears increasingly uncertain. The impasse not only fuels economic volatility but also raises questions about the future of industries that have historically depended on stable international trade. Experts caution that without a concerted effort from the U.S. government to prioritize domestic production through legislative mandates, the cycle of dependency on foreign imports may continue, undermining national security and economic resilience. In conclusion, as both nations navigate this fraught landscape, the future of U.S.-China trade relations remains in flux. The ongoing absence of constructive dialogue could lead to further economic repercussions both domestically and globally. As businesses and industries recalibrate in response to the shifting dynamics, the need for a clear and stable trade policy has never been more pressing. Moving forward, stakeholders on both sides will need to address these persistent issues to foster a more collaborative and mutually beneficial economic relationship. In the ever-evolving landscape of global diplomacy and economic relations, the tension between the United States and China remains a focal point of international discourse. Recent statements from both sides highlight the complexities of their interactions, revealing a landscape fraught with misunderstandings and conflicting narratives. As geopolitical dynamics shift, the implications of these exchanges resonate far beyond the bilateral relationship, affecting global markets and international stability. On April 24, 2025, the U.S. representative to the United Nations Ting Wu delivered a pointed critique of China's handling of UN General Assembly Resolution 2758, which resulted in Taiwan's exclusion from the United Nations in 1971. During a Security Council meeting convened by China, Wu asserted that the resolution has been misused by the People's Republic of China (PRC) to isolate Taiwan, a point that has garnered significant attention. This resolution does not preclude Taiwan's meaningful participation in the UN system and other multilateral fora, Wu emphasized, indicating a strong commitment from the US to advocate for Taiwan's inclusion in international discussions. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed gratitude for the U.S. position, marking a notable moment in U.S.-Taiwan relations. This is the first instance where the U.S. has publicly raised concerns about China's actions regarding Taiwan in a Security Council context, signifying a potential shift in diplomatic strategy. The U.S. aims to counter what it perceives as China's authoritarian influence at the United Nations, a stance likely to escalate tensions in an already fraught geopolitical environment. Simultaneously, the economic front between the two nations appears equally volatile. China has categorically denied engaging in ongoing tariff discussions with the U.S. despite statements from President Donald Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent implying a thaw in relations. Ministry of Commerce spokesperson He Yadong firmly stated, "There's absolutely no current dialogue on economic and trade matters between the two nations," which directly contradicts the optimistic signals emanating from the U.S. administration. This disconnect has left Wall Street analysts skeptical, with many adjusting their GDP forecasts for China amid ongoing uncertainty. The U.S. has recently imposed a staggering 145% tariff on Chinese goods, prompting retaliatory measures from Beijing that include restrictions on critical mineral exports. As the two nations navigate these turbulent waters, the potential for dialogue seems increasingly strained, with China insisting that any discussions must occur on equal footing. The juxtaposition of the U.S.'s assertive diplomatic posture at the UN with its contentious trade relationship with China illustrates a broader narrative of competing interests and strategic maneuvering. As the U.S. seeks to uphold democratic values and counter authoritarianism on the global stage, its economic policies remain a complex interplay of pressure and negotiation. Looking ahead, the future of U.S.-China relations remains uncertain. With both nations entrenched in their positions, the prospect of resolving trade disputes while addressing geopolitical concerns like Taiwan presents a formidable challenge. As global observers watch closely, the outcomes of these interactions will undoubtedly shape the international landscape for years to come. The interplay between diplomacy and economic negotiations will be critical in determining whether a path towards cooperation or continued confrontation lies ahead. In an era marked by escalating economic tensions, the strength of China's economy has become a focal point for global observers. With the United States intensifying its trade conflict and imposing substantial tariffs, the implications for China's economic health are profound. Recent analyses from Liberty Street Economics shed light on the intricate dynamics of China's economic performance amidst these challenges. As Jeffrey B. Dawson and Hunter L. Clark articulate, the assessment of China's economic strength is complicated by a variety of factors, including the ongoing trade confrontation with the U.S. While policy stimulus measures are expected to counteract growth headwinds, the complexities within China's fiscal framework and the discrepancies in economic interpretations render a straightforward evaluation problematic. Notably, the concept of credit impulse, which gauges the flow of new credit relative to GDP, emerges as a critical metric for understanding China's economic resilience. Currently, China's credit impulse suggests the capacity to maintain steady, albeit subdued, growth over the coming year, even as trade tensions escalate. The Chinese economy has faced significant hurdles since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, with prolonged lockdowns and a severe downturn in the property sector. This crisis can be traced back to 2020, when stringent borrowing requirements were imposed on property developers. The subsequent default of a major developer, Evergrande, marked a turning point, leading to widespread financial distress across the sector. As a result, the property market, a crucial component contributing nearly a quarter of the GDP, has suffered dramatically. Recent figures indicate that property sales and new construction starts have plummeted by 60% and 70% respectively, while overall property prices have declined by 16% despite government efforts to stabilize the market. In response to these economic challenges, the Chinese government has implemented a series of stimulus measures ranging from interest rate cuts to increased central government spending. However, the effectiveness of these policies remains a topic of debate. Analysts are divided, with some suggesting that GDP figures might be overstated while others argue that growth has stagnated or even contracted. Dawson and Clark propose a middle ground, suggesting that while China's economy has demonstrated reasonable performance relative to the crisis, it has not achieved the robust growth suggested by official statistics. Evidence of this includes a surge in real fixed asset investment driven by manufacturing and infrastructure, which has helped the nation reduce its reliance on imported goods. Despite these efforts, several factors continue to impede stronger growth. Weak household consumption, the proliferation of unprofitable zombie firms, and a high level of non-performing bank debt have all contributed to a sluggish economic landscape. However, the primary constraint appears to be China's limited fiscal space, which restricts the government's ability to implement expansive fiscal policies without jeopardizing financial stability. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) has highlighted that local government debt has surged to 93% of GDP, significantly complicating fiscal assessments. The response from the Chinese government has included restructuring local government financing vehicles and shifting borrowing to more transparent channels. This move has led to a tightening of fiscal policy at the local level, which, while necessary for long-term sustainability, has further constrained the effectiveness of monetary stimulus. Looking ahead, the trajectory of China's economic growth is likely to be closely tied to its credit policies. The current shift towards a moderately loose monetary stance could enhance the credit impulse, potentially boosting GDP growth by up to 1 percentage point. However, a reliance on credit-driven growth risks perpetuating structural issues, including an overemphasis on industrial expansion at the expense of consumption-driven growth. In conclusion, as China navigates this challenging economic landscape, the interplay between domestic policy responses and international trade dynamics will be pivotal. The ability to adapt to trade tensions while addressing internal economic constraints will dictate not only the trajectory of China's growth but also its role on the global stage. As the situation evolves, the world will be watching closely to see how China reconciles its ambitions with the realities of its economic challenges. In a significant breach of national security, a U.S. Army intelligence analyst has been sentenced to 7 years in prison for selling sensitive defense information to China. Sergeant Corbian Schultz, who held a top-secret security clearance, was arrested in March 2024 at Fort Campbell, situated on the Kentucky-Tennessee border. This incident underscores the ongoing vulnerabilities within U.S. military security and the persistent threat posed by foreign espionage. Schultz's legal troubles began when he pleaded guilty in August 2024 to multiple charges, including conspiring to disclose national defense information and bribery of a public official. The U.S. Department of Justice revealed that he had shared at least 92 sensitive military documents, yielding a payment of $42,000 from a contact he believed was associated with the Chinese government. Among the documents Schultz provided was a report detailing lessons learned from the Ukraine-Russia conflict that could be applied to a potential defense of Taiwan. This revelation is particularly alarming given the escalating tensions between the U.S. and China over Taiwan's status, and highlights the critical nature of the information he compromised. Other sensitive materials included details on U.S. military exercises and the strategic positioning of forces in South Korea and the Philippines, as well as insights into Chinese military tactics and preparedness. FBI Director Kash Patel characterized Schultz's sentence as a stark warning to those who would betray their country, emphasizing the severe consequences of such actions. "You will pay a steep price for it," Patel stated, reinforcing the government's commitment to safeguarding national security. The arrest of Schultz is part of a troubling pattern, It follows the apprehension of 2 U.S. Navy sailors in California on similar charges of espionage for China. Such incidents highlight a growing concern regarding foreign influence and intelligence operations targeting U.S. military personnel. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi reiterated this point, affirming that the Justice Department remains vigilant against Chinese efforts to infiltrate American military circles and will ensure that those leaking military secrets face significant penalties. This case raises serious questions about the security protocols in place to protect classified information and the thoroughness of vetting processes for individuals with access to sensitive military data. As geopolitical tensions continue to mount, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, the implications of Schultz's actions extend beyond legal ramifications, potentially impacting U.S. military strategy and international relations. Looking forward, the U.S. military must reassess its security measures to prevent similar breaches and ensure that sensitive information does not fall into the hands of adversarial nations. As the landscape of global security evolves, the importance of maintaining robust defense mechanisms and safeguarding national interests has never been more critical. The outcomes of this case could serve as a catalyst for reform, prompting a re-evaluation of how military secrets are handled and protected against espionage threats. In the rapidly shifting landscape of international diplomacy, the unpredictability of U.S. foreign policy under President Donald Trump has left China grappling with how to navigate its own interests on the world stage. Since taking office for a second term, Trump has demonstrated a willingness to disrupt established norms, particularly in his handling of conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. This has created a challenging environment for China, which is keen to assert itself as a major geopolitical player yet finds itself in a reactive stance. China's response to the complexities of U.S. foreign policy has been characterized by caution and a traditional approach that favors maintaining a distance from direct involvement in international conflicts. Analysts suggest that Beijing is unlikely to take a lead role in peace negotiations, opting instead to observe and react strategically to developments. It's very unlikely that China will use that kind of leverage, said Jeremy Chan of the Eurasia Group, highlighting China's historical reluctance to leverage its influence over allies like Russia. This pattern reflects a broader strategy of sideline observation, allowing China to capitalize on any missteps by Washington and secure reconstruction contracts once conflicts subside. The stakes are high, particularly with the potential costs of rebuilding war-torn regions. Estimates suggest that the reconstruction of Ukraine alone could reach $1.1 trillion, while Gaza's rebuilding efforts may require around $80 billion. Such figures are particularly enticing for a Chinese economy that is currently facing its own challenges. As the U.S. grapples with its foreign policy, China's diplomatic maneuvering will likely focus on securing advantageous positions in the aftermath of conflicts, rather than actively engaging in conflict resolution. In a separate development, the relationship between China and Azerbaijan has entered a new phase with the recent signing of a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement. This partnership, formalized during Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev's visit to Beijing, is set to deepen cooperation across various sectors including politics, economics, and culture. The historical context of this relationship dates back to 1992, when diplomatic ties were first established following Azerbaijan's independence from the Soviet Union. Since then, Azerbaijan has become a significant participant in China's Belt and Road Initiative, enhancing trade and investment links. The new agreement not only solidifies political trust but also includes provisions such as the mutual abolition of visa requirements for holders of ordinary passports. This move is expected to significantly boost travel and economic exchanges between the two nations. In 2024, trade volume reached $3.744 billion, reflecting a growing economic interdependence, with China primarily exporting machinery and consumer goods to Azerbaijan, while Azerbaijan provides oil and gas in return. As global geopolitical dynamics continue to evolve, the implications of these developments are significant for both China and the U.S. The unpredictable nature of Trump's foreign policy may offer opportunities for China to strengthen its influence in certain regions, yet it also presents risks as Beijing must carefully navigate its relationships with both allies and adversaries. Looking ahead, the interplay of U.S. policies and China's strategic responses will shape the contours of international relations with potential ramifications for global stability and economic growth. As these narratives unfold, observers will be keenly watching how China positions itself in response to America's evolving foreign policy landscape.